Have you ever prepared yourself for a battle, only to realize later that God never intended for you to fight it? Not every war in your life will require your voice. Not every accusation will require your defense. Not every rising enemy will be answered with your effort. There are moments when heaven moves quietly, and you only discover afterward that something was handled without you. Picture this. It's late evening. The room is dim. The air feels heavier than usual. You've replayed the conversation in your mind at least 20 times. The tone, the misunderstanding, the accusation, the way someone looked at you as if they had already decided who you were. You feel the urge to fix it, to explain, to send one more message, to defend your name. Your heart beats faster. Your thoughts rehearse speeches you may never deliver. You imagine confrontations that haven't happened. You build arguments in your mind like shields, and yet something in you hesitates. There is a quiet restraint, a whisper that says, "Be still," but being still feels weak. Being silent feels like surrender. Not responding feels like losing. So you wrestle, not with them, with yourself. You open your phone again. You type, you delete. You type again, you pause, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the noise, there is a strange peace trying to rise. Not the kind of peace that makes sense. The kind that feels like someone else is standing between you and the situation. Days pass. You don't defend yourself. You don't retaliate. You don't chase clarity. And then something shifts. The person who misunderstood you comes back with a different tone. The accusation loses strength. The door you thought was closing remains open. The tension dissolves without confrontation, and you sit there, almost confused, because you were ready to fight. But God defended you without one. There is a moment in Scripture, not just words on a page, but a living scene where a king wakes up surrounded by opposition. He hears the reports. He sees the numbers. He feels the pressure of people rising against him. He could panic. He could strategize. He could lash out. Instead, he rests. And in the quiet of that night, while others are sharpening weapons, he lays down and sleeps. Not because the danger isn't real, but because he knows something deeper is. That scene isn't about poetry. It's about positioning, the inner strength to trust that if God is truly your defender, you don't have to swing at every shadow. There is a maturity that comes when you realize not every attack deserves your energy. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to fight for every piece of validation. Sometimes the greatest display of faith is restraint. Let me tell you a story. There was a season in my life when everything felt like it was collapsing at once. A misunderstanding at work, a strained relationship, a rumor that traveled faster than truth. I remember walking into a room and feeling eyes on me, not curious eyes, measured eyes. I could feel narratives forming around me that I didn't write, and I wanted to correct them. I wanted to gather everyone and say, "You don't know the full story." I rehearsed what I would say. I imagined how I would present facts. I built my case in my mind like a lawyer preparing for trial. But every time I was about to speak, something in me softened. Not weakness, stillness. I felt God asking me a quiet question. "Do you trust me to handle this?" It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no visible sign, just an internal crossroad. Fight for yourself, or trust that I am your shield. The tension was real, because trusting God in theory is easy. Trusting Him when your reputation feels threatened is different. We like to say God is our defender, but when someone misrepresents us, our instinct is to defend ourselves first, let God assist. Yet there is a deeper place, a hidden strength, where you step back and allow heaven to step forward. I chose silence. Not passive silence, intentional silence. I continued showing up. I continued working with integrity. I continued being consistent. I refused to gossip back. I refused to retaliate. I refused to campaign for my own innocence. It felt uncomfortable. It felt risky. It felt exposed, but I stayed still. Weeks later, truth surfaced on its own. Conversations happened that I wasn't part of. Clarifications were made without my presence. The narrative shifted without my intervention. And someone pulled me aside and said, "You know, we realized we misunderstood you. I didn't orchestrate that. I didn't force it. I didn't fight for it. God defended me without a fight. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. When you refuse to fight battles God hasn't assigned to you, you conserve strength for the ones He has. Inner strength is not loud. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lies down and sleeps in the middle of noise. That king I mentioned earlier, surrounded by opposition, wasn't pretending the threat didn't exist. He simply understood that his security wasn't in his own hands. He knew that if God had allowed him to rest, then God was capable of guarding the night. And this is where it becomes personal for you. How many battles have you exhausted yourself in that God never asked you to fight? How many arguments did you lose sleep over? How many explanations did you draft that were never necessary? How many tears were shed because you felt misunderstood? What if some of those moments were invitations, not to prove yourself, but to trust? The world teaches you to defend your brand, protect your name, clap back, respond quickly, never let something slide. But heaven sometimes whispers the opposite. Be still, I've got this. There is a confidence that comes when you know your identity is anchored in something eternal. If your identity depends on people's approval, you will fight constantly. If your identity rests in God's approval, you can rest even when misunderstood. This doesn't mean you never speak. It doesn't mean you never set boundaries. It doesn't mean you become passive. It means you discern. You ask, is this my battle or is this God's? Because when God decides to defend you, He doesn't need your help to do it well. He can shift hearts. He can expose truth. He can open doors no rumor can close. He can silence voices without you raising yours. And when He does, the victory is cleaner. It carries less residue. It doesn't leave you drained. Let me slow this down. Imagine yourself standing in a courtroom. You're ready to present your case. You have your evidence. You have your arguments. And just as you're about to step forward, the judge stands and says, I will speak for you. Would you still insist on arguing? Sometimes our need to defend ourselves reveals our struggle to trust that God sees fully. He sees what was said. He sees what was twisted. He sees what was hidden. And He is not anxious about it. The tension you feel is often the gap between what you see and what He knows the ending. You're reacting to the middle. When God defended me without a fight, it changed how I view conflict. It taught me that silence can be strength, that restraint can be authority, that peace can be warfare. And maybe right now, you're in that space. The misunderstanding hasn't resolved yet. The pressure is still present. The urge to respond is rising. But what if this is your moment to step back? What if heaven is asking you to trust a little deeper? You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to convince everyone. You don't have to clear every rumor. You can stand still and let your consistency speak. There is something powerful about a person who refuses to panic. When others expect a reaction and you remain grounded, it shifts the atmosphere. Because your calm exposes your confidence, and your confidence reveals your trust. This is not weakness. This is inner strength. It is strength rooted in knowing that if God has called you, sustained you, and positioned you, then no human opinion can undo what He has ordained. The king slept, not because he was unaware, but because he was anchored. And when morning came, the opposition had shifted. You don't always see what God does overnight, but that doesn't mean nothing happened. Sometimes while you're resting, heaven is rearranging. While you're quiet, truth is surfacing. While you're tempted to fight, God is dismantling what you cannot see. And when the dust settles, you'll realize you are protected in ways you didn't even understand. Let me leave you here for a moment before we move into the deeper turn. Before we speak any declarations, I want you to sit in this tension. Where are you fighting unnecessarily? Where are you exhausting yourself trying to fix something God is capable of handling? Close your eyes for a second and picture the situation. Now, imagine stepping back, not running away, not giving up, just stepping back and saying, God, If this is yours, I trust you. Feel the release in that. Feel the weight lifting slightly. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't that the battle disappears. It's that you discover you were never meant to fight it alone. And in the next part, we will step into the moment where trust turns into authority, where stillness becomes strength, and where you learn how to stand without swinging. But for now, let this question settle in your spirit. What if the battle you're preparing for has already been handled? 2. Stay in that question for a moment. What if the battle you're preparing for has already been handled? Because here is the deeper truth most people don't talk about. When you feel surrounded, your instinct is survival. You tighten, you brace, you prepare impact speeches in your mind. You imagine worst-case outcomes. You rehearse defense mechanisms like armor. But heaven does not operate from panic. There is a scene that unfolds in Scripture like a slow-motion film. The night is thick, the air feels charged. Reports have come in that opposition is rising. Not small opposition, not mild disagreement, but people gathering, speaking, positioning themselves against one man. It is not anonymous. It is personal. And in that moment, he could have done what most of us would do. Call meetings, send messages, strategize responses, mobilize allies. Instead, he moves inward. He speaks to God, not in a polished religious performance, but in raw honesty. He names what he sees. He acknowledges the numbers. He admits the voices are loud. But then, something shifts. He calls God his shield, not as a quote, not as poetry, as positioning. And then he lies down. He sleeps. That image alone carries power. Because sleep in the middle of opposition is not ignorance. It is confidence. It is saying, if I can rest, it means someone greater is awake. Let that sink in. When God defends you, he does not require your anxiety to activate. Many of us think our worry proves our responsibility. We think if we relax, things will fall apart. We believe tension equals control, but control is not the same as authority rests. This is where inner strength is formed, not in loud victories, but in quiet restraint. I remember a different season in my life where I misunderstood this. I thought strength meant confrontation. I thought if someone crossed a line, I had to immediately address it. If someone questioned my integrity, I had to immediately respond. I equated silence with weakness. Until one day, I felt the Spirit of God challenge me gently. Your peace is more powerful than your rebuttal. That sentence unsettled me, because my rebuttal felt justified. It felt righteous. It felt necessary. But peace felt vulnerable. So I tried something different. Instead of reacting, I observed. Instead of defending, I prayed. Instead of controlling, I surrendered. And I noticed something. The less I scrambled to fix perception, the more stable I felt internally. Because when you stop fighting for your image, you begin to strengthen your identity. And identity rooted in God is unshakable. Let me paint another picture. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a storm. Wind is whipping around you, debris is flying, the sky is dark. People around you are shouting instructions. Some are running, some are blaming, some are predicting disaster. But right in the center of the storm, there is a calm circle. You step into it. The wind still exists. The noise still exists, but it cannot reach you. That is what it feels like when God becomes your defender. The situation may still look intense externally. The rumors may still circulate. The tension may not immediately disappear. But internally, you are untouched. That untouched space is not denial. It is divine covering. This is the part of the story most people skip. They celebrate the resolution. They testify about the outcome, but they do not talk about the night before, the night when nothing looked resolved, the night when the pressure felt real, the night when you had to choose between panic and trust. The king in that ancient scene did not know how morning would unfold. He did not have a visible guarantee. He did not see angels lining up. He simply chose to trust. And trust is not passive. Trust is an active decision to believe that God's perspective is larger than your current evidence. There is something deeply transformative about refusing to internalize every attack. Because not every accusation is an assignment. Not every criticism is confirmation. Not every rising voice is your responsibility to silence. Some battles exhaust you because you entered them without instruction. And when you fight battles outside your assignment, you drain strength meant for your calling. Let that settle. Maybe the exhaustion you feel is not from the opposition itself. Maybe it is from trying to defend yourself in a battle God never told you to fight. There is a difference between being called to stand and being tempted to react. Standing is rooted. Reactive is restless. Standing says, I know who I am. Reactive says, I need you to know who I am. When God defended me without a fight, it did something inside me I didn't expect. It exposed my hidden need for validation. I realized that part of my urge to respond was not just about truth. It was about being understood. It was about being seen accurately. It was about protecting my image. But God was teaching me something deeper. If He sees me accurately, that is enough. If He knows the truth fully, that is enough. If He is committed to my destiny, then no misunderstanding can permanently derail me. There is freedom in that realization, because it means your future does not depend on managing everyone's opinion. It depends on remaining aligned with God. And alignment often looks like restraint. Let's bring this closer to your life. Maybe you are in a workplace where someone misrepresented your contribution. Maybe in your family, someone assumed the worst about your intentions. Maybe in your ministry, someone questioned your motives. Maybe in your friendships, someone believed a version of you that isn't true, and you feel that pressure to clarify. There are moments when clarification is wise. There are moments when boundaries are necessary. But there are also moments when heaven says, stay still. I will handle this. How do you know the difference? You feel it. When God is asking you to rest, there will be a peace that doesn't match the situation. It will not eliminate discomfort, but it will steady you. When ego is driving you to react, there will be urgency, agitation, and a need to control the narrative immediately. Discern the difference. Because your peace is a weapon, the world does not understand that. The world sees silence as weakness. Heaven sees silence as trust. And trust invites divine intervention. Think about it. If you never step back, how will you ever see what God can do without your effort? If you handle every confrontation yourself, you will never witness Him shifting hearts behind the scenes. When the king woke up from that night of rest, he did not wake up to defeat. He woke up to deliverance. The voices that said he would fall were silenced. The opposition that seemed overwhelming was dismantled, and he realized something powerful. God fights differently. He does not always fight publicly. He does not always fight loudly. He does not always fight in ways that satisfy your desire for visible vindication. Sometimes He fights quietly, strategically, completely. And when He finishes, there is no doubt who handled it. Let me ask you something gently. What if your silence right now is not weakness, but positioning? What if your restraint is creating space for God to demonstrate His strength? You are not required to win every argument. You are not required to correct every perception. You are not required to defend your calling to those who cannot see it. You are required to remain faithful. And faithfulness often looks boring in the middle of conflict. It looks like showing up, doing your work, praying privately, keeping your heart clean, refusing bitterness, refusing retaliation. That is warfare, not loud warfare, clean warfare. Because when you fight without bitterness, you do not lose your peace even if the process stretches longer than you hope. And here is something deeply important. If God is truly your defender, then the attack is not personal in the way you think. It is often resistance against what you carry. People react to light when they are used to dimness. People misunderstand depth when they operate on surface. Not because they are evil, but because not everyone can perceive what God has placed on you. So, when someone rises against you, it does not automatically mean you are wrong. Sometimes it means you are visible. But visibility does not require defensiveness. It requires stability. Let your stability speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your peace speak. because nothing confuses opposition more than a person who refuses to panic. And nothing invites divine backing more than a heart that says, God, I trust you to be my shield. In the next movement, we are going to step into that turning point, where trust becomes declaration and silence becomes authority. But before we move there, sit with this. If you knew with certainty that God was actively defending you behind the scenes right now, would you still feel the need to fight? Let that question breathe inside you, because the answer to that question will determine how you walk into what comes next. If you knew with certainty that God was actively defending you behind the scenes right now, would you still feel the need to fight? This is the turning point. Because up until now, we have been standing in restraint. We have been choosing silence. We have been resisting the urge to react. But there comes a moment when silence transforms, not into retaliation, into authority. There is a difference. Silence without trust feels suppressed. Silence with trust feels powerful. And once trust settles deeply, something rises inside you. Not anxiety, not ego, but clarity. You begin to understand that you are not powerless just because you are not fighting. You are positioned. Let's return to that night scene. The king lies down surrounded by threat. But before he sleeps, he does something subtle and powerful. He shifts his focus. He moves from, they are rising against me, to, you are my shield. That shift changes everything. Because what you magnify determines what you experience internally. If you magnify opposition, you will feel overwhelmed. If you magnify God, you will feel covered. The circumstances may not change immediately, but your posture does, and posture determines authority. Let me say something clearly. Trusting God to defend you does not mean you become passive. It means you become spiritually positioned. You stop fighting people. You start standing in truth, and truth does not need to scream. I remember a moment where the pressure felt like it was escalating instead of resolving. I had chosen silence. I had chosen restraint, but internally, I was still carrying tension, because even when you don't respond outwardly, you can still be fighting inwardly. Have you ever smiled publicly but argued internally? Have you ever stayed quiet but replayed conversations in your mind? That is not rest. That is suppressed warfare. God does not just want your mouth silent. He wants your heart settled. So I had to take it a step deeper. I went into prayer, not dramatic prayer, but honest conversation. God, I chose not to fight, but I still feel the weight. I still feel the injustice. I still want to defend myself. And in that quiet moment, I felt a correction that was gentle but firm. You are still holding the case in your hands. That hit me, because even though I wasn't speaking publicly, I was still gripping control internally. I was still monitoring the situation, still checking for updates, still anticipating outcomes. True surrender is not just behavioral, it is internal. So I did something symbolic. I imagined placing the entire situation, every accusation, every misunderstanding, every tension, into God's hands. Not halfway, fully. And I said, if you are my defender, then I release this. That was the turning point. Not when people apologized, not when narratives shifted, when my heart released control, because authority flows from surrender. When you truly surrender a battle to God, something stabilizes in you. You no longer feel frantic. You no longer feel the need to chase resolution. You begin to walk differently. And people notice, not because you are louder, because you are calmer. Calm in chaos is unsettling to opposition. There is a strength that comes from knowing you are backed by heaven. You start to realize, if God is for me, then I do not need to be against everyone. If God is my shield, then I do not need to swing. If God is lifting my head, then I do not need to force recognition. That ancient king didn't just sleep. He woke up differently. He declared that he was not afraid of thousands. Notice that the opposition did not necessarily disappear instantly, but fear did. That is the real miracle. Because sometimes God removes the enemy. Sometimes he removes your fear. And when fear leaves, you stand in authority does not come from winning arguments. It comes from knowing who stands behind you. Let's bring this directly into your life. Maybe the battle is financial. Maybe it's relational. Maybe it's professional. Maybe it's spiritual. Unseen pressure, emotional heaviness, constant resistance. You have been trying to manage it, trying to calculate it, trying to solve it. And you are tired. What if this is the moment where you shift from managing to declaring? Not declaring in panic, declaring in confidence. There is power in words spoken from rest. When you speak from anxiety, your words feel strained. When you speak from authority, your words feel grounded. So, here is the shift. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to say, "God is my defender in this." Instead of, "I have to fix this," you say, "God is handling what I cannot see." Instead of, "I am surrounded," you say, "I am covered." Do you feel the difference? One posture fights, the other stands. Standing does not mean denial. It means alignment. You align your heart with truth instead of fear. And here is something deeply important for you to understand. When God defends you, He does not only protect your reputation, He strengthens your character. Because the space between accusation and vindication develops endurance. It develops humility. It develops emotional control. It develops discernment. You begin to realize you do not have to respond to everything immediately. You do not have to prove your maturity. You demonstrate it through restraint. There is a level of spiritual growth where you stop being provoked easily. Not because nothing bothers you, but because you are anchored deeper. Anchored people are harder to shake. And when you are anchored, opposition loses leverage. Let me ask you something. What if the real victory is not that your enemies fall, but that you remain unshaken? Because if you remain steady, you can move forward without residue. Fighting constantly leaves scars. Trusting builds strength. And now we are stepping into the place where we move from reflection to declaration. This is not about attacking anyone. It is about affirming your position. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the situation that has felt heavy. Now picture God standing between you and it. Not distant, not passive, present. Feel that. You are not exposed. You are covered. You are not alone. You are backed, and from that place, you can begin to speak differently. Not, "I will fight this," but "I trust the one who fights for me." This is where your words shift from reaction to authority. In the next movement, we are going to turn this into prayer and declarations. Not emotional desperation, but confident alignment. We are going to seal this truth. But before we do, sit in this awareness. You do not need to prove what God has already validated. You do not need to force what God has already secured. You do not need to fight what God has already claimed. The question now is not, will God defend you? The question is, will you fully release the battle to Him? Because once you do, everything changes. Everything changes the moment you release it. Not because the situation instantly disappears, not because people suddenly apologize, not because circumstances flip overnight, but because you are no longer carrying what was never yours to carry. This is the final turn. Up until now, you've felt the tension. You've stood in restraint. You've shifted from reaction to trust. You've moved from anxiety to positioning. Now, we step into alignment, prayer and declaration, not as panic, but as authority. Take a slow breath. This is not a desperate prayer. This is not begging. This is agreement with the truth that God defends what belongs to Him. And if you belong to Him, your name, your calling, your future are not unprotected. So let's pray. Father, I release every battle I have been trying to win in my own strength. Every misunderstanding I tried to fix. Every accusation I tried to silence. Every situation I replayed in my mind over and over. I lay it down, not because it didn't hurt, not because it didn't matter, but because you matter more. You see what I cannot see. You know what I do not know. You are not threatened by what threatens me. You are my shield. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient, Now, defend what you have ordained. Protect what you have planted. Silence what is not aligned with your will for my life. And guard my heart in the process. Remove bitterness. Remove resentment. Remove the need to prove myself. If I must speak, let it be guided. If I must act, let it be wise. But if this battle is yours, fight it completely. I refuse to exhaust myself in wars you never assigned to me. I refuse to be provoked into losing my peace. I refuse to let fear dictate my posture. I stand covered. I stand secured. I stand defended. Now take another breath. Let's declare. I will not fight battles outside my assignment. I will not respond to every voice. I will not chase every rumor. I will not defend what God has already validated. God is my shield. God is my vindicator. God is my covering. If He is for me, I do not need to be against anyone. What rises against me will not overwhelm me. What was meant to shake me will strengthen me. What tried to expose me will reveal God's protection instead. I am not surrounded by enemies. I am surrounded by grace. I am not cornered. I am covered. I am not powerless. I am positioned. Feel that settle into your spirit, because here is the promise woven through every story of divine defense. When God fights for you, the victory is cleaner than anything you could produce. You don't leave drained. You don't leave bitter. You don't leave scarred by constant retaliation. You leave stronger. And sometimes, this is important. The greatest evidence that God defended you is not that others fell. It's that you didn't lose your integrity. You didn't lose your peace. You didn't lose your character. You didn't lose your calling. That is victory. There is something holy about walking through opposition without becoming hardened. There is something powerful about being misunderstood without becoming cruel. There is something deeply mature about being attacked without becoming reactive. That is what it looks like when God defends you without a fight. Not that nothing happened, but that you remained intact. And maybe that's what you needed more than public vindication. Maybe the lesson was not about proving you were right. Maybe it was about strengthening your trust. Because once you learn that God can defend you without your effort, you stop living on edge. You stop bracing for impact. You stop anticipating attack constantly. You stop assuming every tension requires your intervention. You begin to walk lighter. And when you walk lighter, you move further. Let me speak this gently over you. The situation that feels unresolved right now, it is not beyond God's reach. The person who misjudged you, not beyond God's influence. The door that feels unstable, not beyond God's control. You do not have to micromanage your destiny. You only have to remain aligned. There is peace available to you right now. Not fake peace, not denial. Real peace. The kind that lets you sleep even when numbers look intimidating. The kind that lets you smile even when voices are loud. The kind that steadies your breathing when tension rises. Because deep down, you know, God is awake. And if He is awake, you can rest. Now let me leave you with this. What if months from now you look back at this very season and realize it was never about defeating an enemy? It was about discovering your covering. What if the silence you chose built more authority than any argument ever could? What if the restraint you practiced strengthened you in ways confrontation never would? And what if, even now, even before visible resolution, heaven is already shifting what you cannot see? You may not have evidence yet, but you have promise. And promise is enough to stand on. So tonight, lay it down. Lay down the need to win. Lay down the need to explain. Lay down the need to control. Let God be God. And as you close your eyes later, as you place your head on your pillow, as thoughts try to rise again, ask yourself quietly, if God is my defender, why am I still fighting? And maybe, just maybe, you will discover that the battle you feared most